Welcome to another community conversation hosted by your Autodesk community. My name is Chris and I'll be your host today. And it is my pleasure, as always, to welcome Phil, who's going to be talking all about Fusion 360 today and taking any questions you might have. So for anyone just joining us for the first time, community conversations are virtual meetups featuring expert speakers from across the community. Sessions range from deep dives, tips and tricks, and live demonstrations on products to roundtables on industry insights, emerging trends, career stories, and so much more. I want to quickly put up our safe harbor statement, which just says that if we make any kind of forward-looking statements in this session, these are not to be taken as promises or guarantees, and please make any and all purchasing decisions based on the state that the software is in today. So before we begin, we have everybody's line muted, but we do want you to feel like you're part of this conversation, so you can join by asking to be unmuted or put a question in the chat, raise your hand. If you want to turn your camera on, if you're comfortable doing that, that would be great as well. We are recording this session, and the recording will be posted to the event page and on YouTube shortly after we complete the session today. So we had this experiment here. Don't know if we still want to keep this going during the session, but before we started, we put up a Slido where people can post questions and comments and such for Phil during the session. So I'm going to just leave this here for a second and see if anybody wants to take advantage of it. And all right, little quick introduction of myself. I am the community manager for product design and manufacturing here at Autodesk, just over 2 years into my position here, coming from a background in Inventor and Vault as a designer for the last 20-25 years, somewhere in that range. A couple of years where I was doing some odd jobs. And that's it about me. I'm going to shut up and let Phil take over because he's the one you came here to see. So, Phil.
Hey there. For those of you who are new to meeting me, I work as a QA engineer for Fusion 360. I have for the last decade, and my entire tenure at Autodesk. Before that, I was a customer working in industry here in the local Portland community, or excuse me, the Portland area, and also teaching at Portland Community College, both Inventor and now Fusion for quite some time. So I have a passion for teaching and answering questions and connecting people with some of those things that get you going in a software and get you down the path to success. So hopefully we can answer some questions like that today, and anything you want to throw at me. I'm really more well-versed, of course, in the design and drafting and that side of Fusion, I suppose you could say, rendering and animations and all that stuff. I'm less well-versed on the manufacturing side and electronic side, but I can certainly point you in the right direction because I know where most of those answers probably would be found anyhow. So anyway, nice to see we have some people online, so looking forward to your questions.
I recognize one of those people that just entered the room. How you doing, Dania?
Hey, I'm doing all right.
You want to learn everything there is to know about Fusion, right?
Let's put it this way. My curiosity is piqued, and I have never touched it, so I thought I'd jump over here and see what was going on.
Perfect, a newbie.
Yeah, welcome.
And then there's Sherry.
Hi, Sherry.
He's a cohort in crime here at Nelson.
Uh-oh.
Ah, nice.
Yes, we decided we wanted to see what was going on.
Well,
awesome.
And there was some questions submitted ahead of time. One of them was weird architectural, where somebody wanted to do shapes and forms and explore that using Fusion, which is different than using Revit, to explore design iterations. But the other one was there was a big update pushed in November too. So big Fusion update.
So, well, for our guests here, just curious, what is it since y'all work together, what is it y'all normally do, and what would interest you in Fusion? Sherry or Dania?
So we work for the design technology team at Nelson. So our job is to know everything, but really know nothing. So we have to learn. And so we take every opportunity we can to learn new programs or things that we're not familiar with, so that, because we do have people that use these things at Nelson, and we want to have the ability to help them when they need help.
Gotcha. Well, so you're going to have to forgive me, but what is Nelson, and what do I need to know about Nelson to help me help you?
So it's Nelson Worldwide, and we are architecture. We do a lot of interior design and stuff like that.
Okay.
And on this team, we do, we're in DTS, Design Technical Services, under the IT umbrella. So we're the fixers, the builders, the families, templates,
Processes.
your processes. So yeah, it's whatever they can throw at us, we have to be ready to do. So yeah, the curiosity of Fusion has been something that I know I have been curious about for some time.
All right. Well, so there's obviously, this is a big ocean here. You've walked up to the side of the ocean, and I need to pluck out which few thimblefuls I have time to discuss with you as we go. But I think I'm starting to form some ideas here. Just a couple of interesting things you mentioned. You mentioned interior design. So there's a thing that Fusion does that might be interesting, which is, and let me know and stop me if it's not, but you can take any Fusion mechanical design and output it as a USDZ file, which if you just open it on a modern iPhone, it instantly puts it in AR VR mode, to where you can just wave the phone around and see the Fusion model. I think you have to do something like tell it where the floor is. So if the floor is on top of a table, you could pick that, or if the floor is on the floor, you could pick that. And then next thing you know, you're looking at a Fusion model in the room you're in. Obviously it's an AR type of experience, so you know, you see the reality plus the, you know, the augmented part, which is the Fusion design. And some of the results I've seen from that, it even appears to be, I've never played with it myself, I've just talked about it and seen some of my students. Right now I have a student who's a furniture maker, and so he's thrilled with it because he was showing me some results, and it looks as if it's even pulling in the lighting from the room to put lighting on the Fusion models. That might have been purely coincidence, but it looked very exciting, and he was stoked about it. So he could try out different pads for his chairs and things. So having the real chair sitting there, and then like the seating pad that he had designed, you know, floating in space, and get nice looking pictures of it. So is that something that that might be interesting to you all?
So we are trying to move towards like AR stuff. So I know that there's like things that we're using, like we have headsets and stuff, or we're using the Wild and things like that. But that is really interesting, actually, to be honest, that you can do the AR in the room that you're designing in, right? So like, if you're like doing a new interior design for a room, and you can kind of test it out. Is that what you were saying?
Well, yeah, it would be more like a placing objects like this. So I have this cool hippie chair I designed, the full fancy bamboo bowl chair from my memories as a kid. And so something like this, you would go up here and you would export it as, and you look at the file types, and USDZ is right there. So you would just export it as this file type, and then the idea would be that somebody who's in situation live, so they're in a site place, they could, you know, with the camera looking at the room around them, pull up this object and have it appear to be, you know, sitting in place in a sort of realistic fashion. So it's sort of a point solution for people who are on site, who want to visualize something that's been designed in Fusion.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
So it's really that simple. It's just a matter of creating the model and then obviously exporting it. It would be cool if there was some other way to keep it from being exported. Obviously, one of Fusion's #1 differentiators between it and other CAD applications is that Fusion puts the data at the center. So this design here, using it for example, you know, exporting it actually breaks that data model, because as soon as I export it, this is the age-old problem of all CAD designs, right? As soon as I export it, it's stale data. Somebody could change the pattern on this, the material, the size of it, and the thing that I'd be showing customers with that exported file would instantly be out of date. That's an old problem, and that's what Fusion actually solves in the way that Fusion keeps all of your designs, let's say, on the cloud, and accessible to everybody on your team, whether they're designers or you know, simulation analysts, people making renderings, exploded diagrams, doing regular simulation, you know, doing your CNC or your drawings, right? So you see that this workspace list here has, like, you know, a ton of different personas that may not overlap at all, or might just be one person, depending on the size of the company that you're working with, right? But the thing that these people would all have in common was that they would all be sharing one single source of data, which is the current version of this design, which is listed as V9. So it's version 9. 9 have been saved, and this is the one that's the most recent one. So so that, you know, kind of wading into that ocean a little bit here, you have the ability to export this and go do AR workflows. It's a little bit uncloudy, as the way I would describe it, but extremely useful. Obviously, in the moment, you're going to be really, you know, thrilling your customers or whoever's looking at this to see such amazing stuff just appearing before their eyes with almost just a push of a button. I mean, it's that fast. So that's cool, but you know, really getting past that, it's like, well, what makes Fusion different? What allows this to happen? And you know, what is different about that experience that's actually native to Fusion, like I just described, the whole data in the cloud kind of aspect. So does that lead to any other questions, or you know, this is a great conversation. I'd love to just go back and forth here.
How can you take a few? Am I on mute?
No, you're not on mute. I can hear you.
Okay, I don't know where I left myself. How can you take a Fusion model and work it into Revit? I mean, is
well,
that difficult?
I think at this point it might also require export. I don't know enough about Revit workflows. There is something called AnyCAD, where Fusion and Inventor and really any other competing software that's outside of Autodesk that produces 3D models can communicate, because Fusion will, you know, it will translate and work with just about anything. I mean, if you look, when I go to open, for instance, I'll just let's see, file types is what I'm looking for here, so if I can get the file type list to appear over here. So you see there's this giant list of CAD file types that Fusion works with. But in the AnyCAD model, what it does is it sort of sets up something similar to a OneDrive folder, where you would have this folder that's connected to the cloud, that's also a residential object on your local machine, so that it kind of, or Dropbox works the same way, all those old style things. So the idea would be that you could put your Inventor models and connect it to one of these folders, and Fusion would see that folder as if it was in the cloud. So it kind of blends those two worlds. That would be the place I would look, but I really don't think there's very much by the way of interop between Revit and Fusion. I don't really have an answer for that, so I'll just be honest with you. That would be the path I would take, but I would assume that right now that doesn't work.
I think at this point, you probably would need to go from Fusion to Inventor and then use Inventor's translation to Revit, if that even works. I've never seen it done.
That would be interesting, Chris. So you could use AnyCAD to get the Fusion model open in Inventor, and then open the tunnel to
Inventor
Revit
to create the link to Revit. But I like I said, I've never seen it done, so I'm not 100% sure that would even work.
If we could just figure out how to merge in the VRs, you know, somehow bring it together.
Well, you can do that with an SAT file or an industry standard file. So you could do that both from Revit and Fusion or Inventor, any of those. Go to a common file format, an IGES or something like that. VR and AR, most of them all have those common formats they'll bring in.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, to be sure, I'm definitely thinking, my first thought is how do you stay in the cloud? So that's the point of view I'm answering from, is like, well, how do you connect Fusion and Revit? And I'm like, well, in a cloudy way, that's what I was describing. But yeah, in a traditional way, you know, Fusion will export just about anything, and I'm sure Revit can open up various file types. All Autodesk products use the Autodesk material libraries, so you should expect to be able to get things with, you know, to apply materials in Fusion that would theoretically survive the transfer over, perhaps as a step file format, which maintains materials pretty well.
Because we have,
or better natively, anyway.
yeah, we have a lot of interior designers that are working with furniture pieces, and some for just like client specific, that might be interested in working with us also. So yeah, we were here for the curiosity side of how to do it, of what you're doing, and how it could benefit us.
All right.
Dania, if I was doing furniture design, I would be using Fusion. And then there are a lot of furniture designers out there, and industrial designers.
That are using Fusion, like that have them loaded on their websites and everything.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay. See, that's where this will probably come in handy. And then the fact, like what he was talking about earlier, being able to see it like real time in the room that you're trying to put it in, especially when, you know, an architect's on site or a designer's on site. But yeah, if there's a lot of furniture, because we always have trouble. Well, not always, but we do a lot of furniture design in Revit because they need it to put into their model. So if there was an easy way to get it, like Johnny was saying, and export and somehow make it useful as a Revit family for us, if, you know, clearly the design of the furniture in Fusion is huge, like hugely better than Revit. So.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's people that do this, and then, you know, yeah, you could export it out and put it into a Revit family into there. But you're also, the people that are designing the furniture are also able to keep it in Fusion and be able to use more complex shapes and accurate, you know, industrial design shapes and curves and attachments, as well as prepare it for manufacturing. So
yeah.
Yeah, I'm hoping this will resolve here. It seems to be taking its sweet time. What I wanted to show was this as a what we have, the view of the stuff in Fusion Teams, is something too that might be interesting to you, which is to take the Autodesk LMV viewer. Let me see if I can get this with a public link. Can I get a shared public link? That might do it for me as well, might do it faster. All right, let me copy that and see if I can't get this to open up here. No content found. That's nice. Let's just go straight to the design. Here we are. So everything you make in Fusion, and this is not a Fusion thing here. This is what we call our large model viewer, and so this is the kind of thing that people would embed on their website. So this is hosted via the MyHub Autodesk 360 portal, right? So I'm just looking directly into this design file itself, but taking this view and stuffing it into your own web page. So there's local manufacturers do this with their designs, like window makers and people who do curtain walls and things like that, right? There's local manufacturers, and I'm also working right now with a food products company that wants to do this as well. So you can take this code, and your web designers can actually take these designs and put them right into your website. So if you have objects like this that you want people, either customers or salespeople, to click into to explain things, you can get a viewer like this that also gives you a whole bunch of markup ability and commenting ability and so forth, to you know, visually share the models and whatever story you're trying to tell there. So that's another thing that might be interesting to you. And this all comes for free. It's just a matter of taking this thing and actually, I just grabbed a link that I would share somebody. So if I was, if I wanted to, I could just send that to anybody, and if they clicked on it, you know, this is a view they get. That's the native behavior out of Fusion. but it's this view itself which is what people are extracting and using in their web development. So it has, you know, familiar objects like the view cube and things like that to help people. So yeah,
Neat.
it sounds like there's some cool stuff you could get from this.
Thanks.
I just posted in the chat, I found a forum post on the Revit architecture that does have, it's an older post, it's from 2020, but it does have a workflow going from Fusion 360 through Inventor and then into AutoCAD, and then from AutoCAD to Revit, where it can be turned into a generic model family. I don't know if that helps you or not, but I put that in because I don't speak the Revit language, so I'm not sure. But I put that in the chat so you can take a look at that afterward and see if that gives you any helpful hints.
Yeah, there's SAT files too.
Yeah.
And I guess those have really great quality when imported into Revit.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
mentioned SAT in this forum post as well.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I just posted that link in our DTS chat that we have. Because there's a couple of them that couldn't get over here today, and plus it's its way of keeping it.
So would it help if I describe some of the stuff that you're looking at on the screen here? Like if someone was to get into Fusion to begin with, it might help if they sort of knew some of the stuff that they're looking
Yeah.
at. So basically, once you log into Fusion, right, there's a few different areas that are really important. And so on the left-hand side here, this thing I keep opening and closing is called the data panel. Think of this as sort of navigation to what we would have projects with design files in them, right? So in Fusion speak, a project, think of it sort of like a filing cabinet or something like that. There is a division between these projects which allow for, you know, hierarchical organization, right? Like who is invited into this project. This is my education account, by the way. So I'll be teaching later tonight and teaching this particular class. So this is what we're looking at here. But this particular user, so me as a customer, as it were, has various projects set up. So I have just to divide up the work, right? So I have my fundamentals class and I have my advanced class. Then I have some other things that are interesting to me, like when I'm working with local first robotics students, I have a project there. So it's just think of this as like a file cabinet with stuff in it, and I want these to be separate. And the reason it's separated at this level allows me to control who accesses it and what sort of access they have to it. So you might have full read and write. Let's say I invited you to one of my projects. I could give you full read and write editor privileges here, but I could reduce you to just a viewer right here, depending on the needs, for instance. So now, interestingly enough, I have one called Fusion City where I designed a bunch of stuff. Early on, I wanted to make really, really large objects in Fusion just to test out the capacity. So I made like spaceports for UFOs. I made large buildings that were a couple of 100 feet tall. I imported designs from customers who were this person tried to build a barn in Fusion with every single 2x4 detailed, which was pretty wild.
Well,
So yeah, I mean, there's you can do like this is a 1 kilometer city plot right here. So I just starting with something rational, like is this 1 kilometer square or circled or whatever, and then also just bringing in various large objects. Like I made this city block, I made an arena, and so forth. I won't go in here and open these up, but you get the idea. This is a way of organizing into various categories of stuff. So once you get into your data panel, it looks a little bit like you'd find, in Windows or Mac operating systems. That sort of idea is here, where folders act like folders. Folders contain things like files and other folders, and these folders have various properties to them, like well, not much you can do with that right there, but you can see you can write, like everything Autodesk, you right click on it and figure out what you can do with it. Now, also at the project level, there's this idea of the people tab. Now, this has since changed a bit. I appear to have a slightly older view. We're transitioning to the mode where 100% of your people management is done via the web portal. So that would be a matter of going out to this view of the web to do your people management. And this was the thing that for some reason timed out before. It doesn't look like it's going to now. Here we are. So project members, I can invite people, I can provide various levels of permission. The reason this is this way is because I'm still using I just remembered now, I'm still using an older mode of this where I'm not actually in a team hub right now. I'm in a single user storage, which you will not see. Any modern user is going to be on that in a regular team. I personally haven't migrated it over because I'm also a software engineer who tests Fusion. And so at some point we're going to force everybody to migrate over. I don't know when that is, so don't quote me. But I am leaving all of my legacy stuff in a state where I will have to be forced to do it. And that's what I want to test when the time comes. So I'm deliberately out of date, but it all pretty much still works the same, whether you have the newer style or the older style that you get. So anyway, once you get into a folder, you create designs. These designs these are lots of renderings I have for some of these designs. This is just a very introductory material you're looking at here, where we make a chair and we make a little garbage can and stuff. And things that you bring in. So if you want to upload or import anything from your existing CAD stack of data, like you want to bring in little bits and pieces, or you want to bring in furniture, you want to bring in buildings, whatever you want to bring in, that Fusion will open. And I showed you that list of file types. It's pretty broad. You can hopefully have something on that list that you can bring in here. It'll open up Inventor and other CAD file types natively, mostly on the manufacturing and design side, but also including a lot of different mesh file types. So there's definitely some flexibility there depending on what data you're working with. So that's the data panel. So connecting with people, connecting with the web, organizing your designs, and then using it to do things like either open the designs, insert them into current designs. So this would be connecting, like making basically an external reference by inserting one design into the next. Other things you can do with these designs, like share a link or do some management of those things. So that's the data panel, and when you close it, you're in the design world, and what you have is, as I was describing earlier, your design data at the center with a full set of tools here, and this is the design workspace, and you have these tabs for various methods of design. So solid modeling, surface modeling, mesh modeling. We have parametric mesh, so I think that's pretty unique to Fusion. The mesh workflows that you do are stored as steps in your timeline down here, and you can back up and edit them and stuff like that. So parametric mesh is a pretty big deal. We have sheet metal for fabricating with sheet metal. We have plastic. So this is an extension. This is an example of something we do in Fusion where the workflows that would be more professional, we put them as paid extensions, so that you can have a base level that's really productive. But if you do plastic all the time, then you take advantage of these powerful plastic tools for doing rules-based plastic design. That's very similar to rules-based sheet metal design, but for plastic. So it makes you a more successful designer. But from there, you have the different workspaces, and all of these would be workspaces that you would use to work on this current model. So for instance, if I wanted to somehow manufacture this, I would go to the manufacturing workspace, and I could start programming tool paths and making G code to somehow machine all of this stuff. Or likewise, if I needed to simulate it, I could go to the simulation workspace and pick out one of these simulation studies. So, the value, if you know anyone that's doing simulation with Fusion, now there is actually a tie-in between ANSYS and Fusion. So you can actually get access to even more powerful ANSYS workflows through Fusion. But if you look at these various study types here, back in the day when I was using Inventor and I needed some of these things once or twice a year, the barrier to entry was extremely high. So I would pay roughly 10 times what I would pay for an Inventor license just to have access to a couple of these things, like something like thermal or thermal stress, because I designed electronics and it was important to be able to do basic stress and thermal stress and also modal. All of that would cost basically 10 times what an Inventor subscription costs. Now, on the Fusion side, it's a little disruptive because all of this costs the price of a Fusion subscription, right? So you get in here, there's at some point you could trip into some cloud powered workflows that might involve some cloud credits, and the system will warn you when you're doing that. But for ones like simple stress and modal frequencies, you should be able to explore, as needed. So, but these are professional tools, and it's a fraction of the cost of what what people might be used to if even just 10 years ago. It would be impossible to get this kind of value for the price you're paying in Fusion. So, and you can, if you're buying things with cloud credits, obviously you're not on a full-time subscription. A very powerful way to connect the various aspects of your work and people who are working on your designs to a single source of data. If this chair design ever changes, all of these workspaces would read that change and update or prompt the user to maybe, I don't know, fix up some of the toolpaths because the change invalidated one of the toolpaths or something like that, or rerun the simulations because some of the inputs had changed. So that's how everybody on the team stays up to date with the absolute latest part of the design. That is the #1 differentiator for Fusion, and it's all right there. Any questions about that?
No, I like all the different tools that you have, the solids, the surface, the mesh, and the sheet metal and stuff. I can see, well, that would be a lot easier to use than your extrusions and sweeps and etc. than Revit's got. And also, when you do can you do a hollow out once you get something done?
What does that mean?
Where if you take it and say, I don't want it to be solid, I want it to be just like a thickness instead, and have it hollowed out inside.
Yeah, that would be something like the shelf command.
Okay.
Is that what you mean? Something like that?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a full set of tools here. So
Wow.
I would say that if anyone approaching Fusion who has an Inventor or a background in one of the other competing softwares with Inventor, would find all the modeling tools that they need to get their job done. Plus or minus, a few small things that Fusion hasn't been taught how to do yet. But in terms of core modeling, Fusion can pretty much model anything that you would expect for this kind of modeling. So,
I mean, I've pulled some wild stuff in Revit, but that I know would be easier in anything else.
Yeah. Oh, I can imagine. And there's things that Revit does that would be absolutely maddening in Fusion, like that barn, for instance. There's why would you model all 200 2x4s that are all cut at different angles and lengths and stuff?
Because they can.
Yeah, and you'd get to a cut list sooner or later, but that's a lot of work for that. One of my favorite things is the render workspace. I think Fusion has an extremely powerful rendering environment. You have this option of, so you can see I've imported a lighting environment here for the background. This is imported, so I can render my chair out on the rooftop anytime I want. There's also this idea of a rendering gallery. So there's in-canvas render, which allows you to do something like this and get a quick,
cool,
very realistic render. And I'll stop this. I'll go ahead and stop it because it's very resource intensive. Or you could use the cloud rendering tool or local rendering tool. So this will send it up for a few credits. We'll send it up to the cloud. Maybe you get in the angle and the lighting you like, and then get a really nice big cloud render. You can, of course, make this as big as you want, like 3,000 or 4,000 pixels across. Or if you don't want to use cloud credits, you can switch over to local rendering, which will use one of your CPU cores in the background and do the same job and eventually populate it down here. Now, one of the cool things about this is that if I were to, let's say, first of all, you can see there's 4 versions of this. There isn't much difference to them. You can see I changed the material at some point. So every saved version of this design has managed to get re-rendered every time I save it. Okay. And this is the way you do it. You can put this over here, and if you drag it into this area, I don't know why it's not doing it. It must be something I'm doing wrong here. But the idea is that you can tell Fusion, hey, look, if you save this design, it'll just run off and in the background re-render it. So you have a set of what basically commercial grade renderings. I mean, more or less. I think other people would disagree with me when it comes to what they think about the Fusion renderer, because there are people who insist that other third-party products are better. But for the people I see that make great use of this, they don't need anything like that. They look at this, and their customers look at this and see it as magical and beautiful, and they have full control over it. So there's, is this one of those cases where Fusion is not as good as the rest of it, but it's good enough that you can't tell the difference? Like, I think for people who are just trying to get their job done, why would they need to have all these extra rendering tools, for instance? There's pretty cool settings in here too, by the way. So it's not just primitive point and shoot stuff. You can actually go in and change your camera settings. So anyone who knows a little bit about photography can set up the right focal length and exposure and all that kind of stuff. And set depth of field too, so where you can even get more realistic looking renderings, where I put the depth of field on this thing where the background is blurry but the foreground is not blurry. So lots and lots of control over your rendered images. And I think this is that 80-20 rule, except I'd say this gets probably 90-something% of it done with just 10% of the tools you'd find in other places. So pretty powerful, really. Anyway, so there's some visualization stuff. There's also a drawings package. It's basically run off of the guts of AutoCAD. So if you need to create drawings, you will make essentially what would appear to be AutoCAD-like drawings, and you can export those as if you need to, or just leave them in there. But most of the time, people just use that for fabrication purposes.
Yeah.
So we're still growing all of these things too, by the way. So every release we add to every one of these workspaces. So Fusion is as cool as it is a work in progress. So if you have needs, and you have customers with needs, and they've set up conversations with us over time, we do absorb all of that information. It takes a while. It's a slow-moving train as fast as we're releasing, but conversations today about how to please the customers of today would be, the kind of thing that would get into the pipeline over the next year or two, that kind of thing. But it fuels all of our development. Like, everything we need for drawings is based on customer feedback of what they would rather see in drawings right now, for instance. Same thing with manufacturer. We work very closely with other communities, like our manufacturing customer advisory boards and that kind of thing. So does this lead you to anything else? I'm just sort of going on now, and I could probably pause for questions.
No,
Sorry, go ahead.
I think I've seen enough to pique my curiosity about wanting to play with it some more. I do know that Sherry and I have a meeting to get ready for here in a few.
All right. One last thing. Once you get into Fusion, right, there is this help menu here. So anyone who's, oops, I just clicked on something. You need to do that. Here we go. Searching help takes you straight to the online documentation. We're quite proud of how well we keep it up. If you find that more depth is needed in any area, just let me or let one of us know. Lots of good information. You have your community pages. There's some ways to help if Fusion's not running right. You can go through the support and diagnostics stuff. But learning and documentation, oh yeah, there's also a great set of tutorials as well. So you go to learning and documentation, go to self-paced learning, and you could start here and in a couple of hours, at least know how to get your way around, right? So these things, the first few introduction, get started with modeling, these 3D modeling basics and stuff like this. these are largely video driven, but they do get to clicking along fairly quickly. So a couple of hours later, you'd know where to find stuff, how to make shapes, and to feel comfortable so that you can then start applying your own workflows to this because you're not having all that stuff in the way.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So hopefully that gets you going.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Cool. Well, you're welcome.
I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, I hope to see you back here again with more questions. I'm here every month. So I'm always happy to have follow-up questions. So if you came back and said, all right, you showed us this stuff, but I need to know this, this, and this. And it's like, okay, boom, let's do it. Because I love that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, hopefully I can have better answers than my answers about Revit, though.
Well, hopefully we'll have more intuitive questions after we get a chance to look at this.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, cool. Yeah, I mean, it's I do a lot of Autodesk University classes, so there are resources where me and some other folks have got together and explained like all of these workflows and what to think about when you're in the big model. What does the parametric engine in Fusion? What do you need to make sure that it's happy and like how your designs are structured to have a better parametric outcome? How to start with just the basics and go from there. So more in depth, starting with basics kind of workflows and stuff like that. So all of these things are captured as Autodesk University classes, and so that's another place I would take you to if depending on what you have questions about.
All right,
Yes.
great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Take care. See you
Bye.
next time. All right.
Okay.
All right. Bye.
Okay. So what was the question you said was in the chat about was that from them or was that from someone in their group? It's interesting that we get a lot of architecture over
It was in the
overlay here.
Slido, wasn't it, Sean?
It was in the Slido as anonymous. The question, let's see here. Let me grab it for you. The first one was the updates, the latest Fusion updates. The other one was modeling at building scale while allowing part and detail management to allow more freedom, architectural form exploration.
Okay, that's a
Sure
really
sounds
broad
like a Revit question, but
it does. It's a broad statement, but if you can ask me anything, and so I'm going to go ahead and take a crack at that. So let's start off with a blank design. So first of all, so we just heard a whole bunch of stuff. So if you're watching the recording up to this point, you saw a whole bunch of stuff about how Fusion is organized and how your stuff gets stored in the cloud and all that stuff. So all of that still is at play here. But what are we trying to do? We're trying to actually make a model, right? Let's make an architecture size model. So starting with just that idea, I'm going to get into my document settings in a blank design and look at the units. And quite interestingly enough, we have meters and foot. So we don't have miles or kilometers, but you can extrapolate that you could get there pretty quickly. So assuming I'll just stay in these units. So set my unit as feet. Click OK. And then maybe I might make a sketch of like the plot plan, right? So right now I'm in a Z up model. That's important. If you're not seeing Z up, you can change that in preferences because you might for some reason have Y up, which would be not what you want. So for the purposes of doing a big architectural layout, I think Z up would be perfect. And I'm going to start my sketch on the Y and X or XY plane. So I'll do that, and then you notice you kind of start off zoomed way in. So, and we're using feet, so now we're only at 5 and 10 feet scale here. But I'll just go ahead and put a rectangle on here, and we'll just use this to represent something like the plot for my own piece of property here in Portland, right? So I'll reveal a little bit about myself here. My lot is approximately 85 feet deep. And zoom out a little bit because it's going to bring this in, and it's about 45 feet wide. So right here is something that's approximately the size of the plot of land that my house sits on. Now, if I want to, I could also probably take this and make it all construction geometry because I don't really need to extrude anything with this information. So in Fusion, your line type determines whether or not your sketches will make what are called profiles. So unless you're making 3D shapes, you don't need these profiles to be generated whatsoever. And really a construction line type, by just selecting it and swapping it with construction, would be sufficient. So excuse me. So architectural scale was just achieved here. We have a pretty good sized plot of land. Now, what you do with it from here is up to you, right? So this is just showing how to sort of get in and create an envelope this size. As I was explaining earlier, I've done some testing because my job is to test Fusion. So outside of the bounds of what Fusion normally does is this idea of, well, how big of a model could I make? And so I've made models that are a kilometer across. I've modeled the Great Pyramids at Giza, all sitting there together, because we know the size and positions of those things. So I was able to actually just extrapolate that into a Fusion design and make something as big as that actual layout, right? And then put things next to it. One of my ideas at one point was to make landmarks and just use them in Fusion to make little comparisons, like how big is the Giza Plateau versus the Washington Monument or something like that. Never got too far with it, but I did prove that Fusion could easily model something that's at least a kilometer across. Here is a big caveat. If you do something, the modeling engine will not like it if you create an envelope that's really, really long. So by doing so, I would say, if I was to take this circle and move it a mile in one direction, the viewing part of Fusion is going to have a real hard time with that. It's not going to know how to make the scene. You can see that it's adjusting the scene as I go, like the grid appears and disappears depending on where the mouse is and where geometry is. So that is a limitation in Fusion. The only reason that this works really well in this case is I made a rectangle that is relatively proportional. It's not just one straight line. I guess another way of describing it is if I started with a blank design and made a sketch and drew a line that is 100 meters long right here, it's going to be more difficult for Fusion to figure out where the actual scene is, because there isn't really enough geometry there to make a bounding box that's that big, and it falls outside of that zone. But not a big deal, really. Just something to be aware of when you're doing this, that you want to sort of make proportional things that are really large, like I said, a 1 square kilometer plot of ground that I could put little buildings on, or pyramids or whatever I was designing for that testing. So there's one way. Now, what was the second half of that question? Was something about forms. So I don't know if they really mean forms like form modeling.
What they're talking about is when you're figuring out a building you're going to build, you kind of explore shapes like, longer, taller, more round. You just kind of explore shapes.
Okay, so we're not really thinking of organic shapes like with the form environment, although the Amazon offices up in Seattle might make you think of that, right? That's
if you got a big bag of cash, yeah.
I also get updates from the Monolithic Dome Institute in Texas, where they make concrete domes that are fireproof, earthquake-proof, tornado-proof kind of stuff. So those would be made with the form environment as well, but I don't think that's what people are after. So, all right. So to explore forms, you could do it with parametric modeling, right? So I could create sketches and then extrude those sketches into shapes. I could do that all day long, but I would be creating a parametric timeline history and a bunch of dependencies between these shapes with each other, which makes editing a little bit harder when you're trying to just explore, right? So one of the things you could try would be, maybe if you're just purely exploratory and you don't care about any stored values whatsoever, is just turn off design history. And what you're doing is you're turning off the parametric history. So let me see if I can't retrieve this. Here it is. So I have this parametric history where the sketch information is stored, and this is what makes it parametric, is I can edit these values. These are the dimensions that I place in my sketch, And editing those values allows this thing to recompute. So the timeline down here is always trying to recompute anything you put into it. That's just parametrics 101. If you're not interested in that whatsoever, you could do purely non-parametric by turning off the timeline history. Or if you wanted to kind of have a mix of both, you can create timeline-free, parametric-free nodes in your time, in your timeline, I should say, using a base feature. So when I go into base feature, what this is these are the non-parametric modeling commands. There's no parametric table here, right? So everything I do is just, that's the shape, but the trade-off is that I can also directly manipulate that shape without violating any sort of relationships where I'm going to get errors and things are going to fail and stuff like that. So you don't get to have the updates, but you don't get to have any of the confusing relationships that you probably don't need at this point. So from here, it's a matter of, okay, well, maybe our primitives are good enough, right? So maybe you would want to have like a box primitive, and you can start building out your shape here, get it up to, you know, some height that you want, maybe something like that. Adding in, you know, something like a cylindrical shape. Maybe make it a new body or join it together and start working on you know, how you want to explore the forms that you're working with. So I'll go ahead and I'll put a fillet on here as well. So we have some building sized shapes we're started developing with. Now the exploration part comes in when you maybe turn on the move copy command, and you know, you can move bodies around, or you could move faces around. So if I decide to move this face, I can change where that face goes. I can, you know, let's try that again. You know, quickly change sizes on things. There's this idea of the press pull command, which all it really does is it's sort of a Swiss Army knife command. Right now, if I pick a face with press pull, it will offset the face. But if I let me put press pull on my toolbar, it's usually up there by default. If I pick an edge, I can change the radius of it. If I pick press pull and then just pick a face here, this allows me to edit this radius. So there's one of the kind of fun things I like about non-parametric modeling in Fusion is that any sort of analytical surface like this arc right here. So when I go to actually edit this, it seems like it's parametric. It's pretty cool. It's not stored in a parametric table. But when I click this and I click this, you'll see that it knows the radius of that. And that's because it can measure the radius of this arc. It's an analytic surface, or it can measure we'll just change it. Actually, that was kind of a cool thing. Let me show you that. Just little tricks like this, you should really play around with it. So I want to change that radius to the same radius as this. I can just refer to it by clicking on it. And now the radius of this bigger cylinder is what's supplied as the radius of this fillet right here. So lots of cool little tricks like that help you get through modeling very quickly. I know this isn't a very attractive looking building. That's why I'm not an architect.
Hey, you never know though.
Yeah, one more little trick here. So like even here, I'm extruding this up. I just select this top face and it snaps to that same value, right? But again, this is non-parametric, so you can get in and out of here fairly quickly. You want to delete things, you just, let's see, I'll select this face and just press delete and it goes away, that kind of thing. So hopefully maybe that gets somebody down the road. They can do a big layout, they can quickly put some shapes in there, and they can use these modeling commands to sort of explore as you go.
All right, well, we're hitting up time here, Phil, so should we wrap it?
Yeah, we should wrap it up. There's we have the other question about the latest update. It was just a minor update, so just some bug fixes and things like that. I don't really know enough that's interesting to talk about. I mean, I'm sure it's interesting to lots of people, but what I would say is that later on this month, in just a couple of weeks, we are planning another major update. That work is found in the insider builds. You just saw a little of it, right? So I'm using the Fusion Insider build right now And this is the, and it's totally fine for me to show this because anybody can join our insider program and see cool things like our improvements to the parameters dialog box. So that's all coming later this month, assuming everything makes it through testing. Of course, don't make any business decisions based on my promises, but we certainly intend to release this as on schedule at this point.
Awesome.
And that's it. I'll stop sharing now. If I can find
I'll
my Zoom controls. There we go. Stop sharing.
share mine and we'll wrap this one up. Okay, so thanks a lot, Phil. Lots of great information. It was so much fun to have Dania in here for one of these and see some Revit people ask questions.
I love the engagement. That was incredible.
Yeah. So if you want to become a community conversation speaker, we'd love to hear from you. We have a proposal form where you can put down all of your ideas. If you click or if you scan the QR code that we have on the slide here, you can get right to that proposal form and should be able to put your ideas together and someone will get a hold of you to set something up. We also would love to encourage you to get more involved in the community. Obviously, we have our community forums. Most people are aware of those, but you can also check out community groups. Take a look at our Community Voices blog and then maybe apply to become an author for that if you're interested. We also have a community journal blog, which is a blog where we share news and information about the community with the community. This one is controlled by the community team itself. We use it for announcements and events coming up. Take a look at our student group hub, and of course, keep an eye on the community conversations page so that you don't miss out on any of the great webinars that are upcoming. And with that, I want to thank everybody for joining and for watching the video, those of you who are watching it, and we will see you next time.
Thanks a lot, everyone. See you around. You go ahead and stop recording.
Yeah, I was trying to find it.